Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will offer an update on the case of Ellen Greenberg. She is the topic of a documentary titled Death in Apartment 603, What Happened to Ellen Greenberg. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the incident, then offer my analysis. Ellen Ray Greenberg was born on June 23, 1983, in New York City. She was raised by her parents Josh and Sandy. Ellen earned a bachelor's degree in communications and a master's degree in education. She lived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where she worked teaching first grade. Ellen became romantically involved with a man named Samuel Hankin Goldberg, who went by the name Sam. The couple became engaged in June 2010. Their plan was to get married on August 3, 2011, in Hershey, Pennsylvania. The couple lived in an 1,100 square foot apartment in a building which used to be called Venice Lofts. This is on East Flat Rock Road in the Manayunk neighborhood of Philadelphia, right next to the Schuylkill River. Their apartment number was 603. Now moving to the timeline of the incident. On January 26, 2011, at 6:33 p.m., Ellen's fiancé Sam called 911 and told the operator that he needed emergency now. He just walked into his apartment and his fiancé was on the floor with blood everywhere. After being directed to perform CPR, Sam said there was a knife sticking out of Ellen's chest. The operator told Sam not to perform CPR and to wait for officers to arrive. When the police arrived, they discovered that Ellen was dead in the apartment. Here is what the police found during the course of their investigation. Ellen's body was on the kitchen floor, just inside the front door of the apartment. She was on her back, with her head and shoulders resting against the corner formed by the kitchen cabinets next to the oven. Her eyeglasses were on the floor next to her right hand. In her left hand, she was holding a white towel. She had been stabbed with a 5-inch steak knife, which came from her kitchen. The knife was found in the left side of her chest with the handle protruding. In total, Ellen had sustained 20 stab wounds. She had been stabbed 8 times in the chest, 1 time in the abdomen, 1 time in the scalp, and 10 times in the back of her neck. Many of the wounds only penetrated a few millimeters. There were no defensive wounds on her hands, wrists, or forearms. The only DNA on the knife belonged to Ellen. Her cause of death was multiple stab wounds. In addition to the stab wounds, Ellen had 11 bruises in various stages of healing. Other than Ellen being dead on the kitchen floor, there was no sign of a struggle in the apartment. Nothing appeared to be disturbed. None of the property belonging to Ellen or Sam was missing. Several valuable items were in plain view, like cash and 3 laptop computers. An inspection of the front door revealed it had been locked from the inside with a swing bar lock and forced open from the outside. The only other way to enter or exit the apartment was through the sliding glass door for the balcony. The apartment was on the 6th floor, which would have made it pretty difficult for anyone to use that door. Furthermore, it had been snowing that day, and the snow on the balcony was completely undisturbed. The police were able to construct a timeline of the events leading up to Ellen's death. Due to the snowstorm, the school where Ellen taught closed that day at 11 a.m. Her coworkers reported that Ellen was distraught, not about the school closing due to weather. Rather, she had some concerns about submitting grades. Ellen was extremely anxious when she left work. At 1:26 p.m., on her way home, she fueled her vehicle. This is not necessarily unusual during a snowstorm. Ellen arrived at her apartment sometime around 1:30 p.m. The last outgoing phone call from Ellen's phone was made at 2:33 p.m. The last outgoing text message was sent at 2:47 p.m. And the last activity on Ellen's computer was at 4:46 p.m. According to Sam, he left the apartment at 4:50 p.m. to go to the gym, which was in the apartment building. This was confirmed by video surveillance. Sam indicated that Ellen was in the apartment at this time, and she was definitely alive. At 5:27 p.m., Sam was captured on video surveillance at the elevator getting ready to return to his apartment. At 5:30 p.m., Sam arrived at the door to the apartment. He said that he used his key to unlock the apartment door, but he could not make entry because the swing bar lock had been engaged from inside the unit. Knowing that Ellen was inside, Sam tried calling her several times. His first call was placed at 5:30 p.m. Ellen did not answer any of these calls. From 5:32 p.m. to 6:11 p.m., Sam sent Ellen several text messages. For example, "Hello," "Open the door," "What are you doing?" I'm getting blanked off. You better have an excuse. What the blank? And you have no idea. Ellen did not respond to any of these text messages. Sam went downstairs and spoke to an employee of the apartment building about his predicament. Ultimately, Sam returned to the apartment alone and broke the door in. This is when he discovered Ellen's body and called 911. Again, that call was placed at 6:33 p.m., 22 minutes after Sam sent the last text message to Ellen. Neighbors did not see or hear anything out of the ordinary that day until Sam banged on the door for apartment 603. When comparing the story supplied by Sam to the available evidence, the police determined that he was telling the truth. No one was with Ellen in the apartment when she died. She was alone and was responsible for what happened. The police never secured apartment 603. On the next day, the police authorized a crime scene cleanup company to clean the apartment. This, of course, destroyed all the evidence. On January 28, 2011, 2 days after Ellen died, the authorities indicated that Ellen was murdered. So initially they said she was responsible. Now they were saying someone else killed her. On March 11, 2011, less than 2 months after Ellen died, the authorities reverted back to their original conclusion. They indicated that Ellen was the one responsible for her death. In the years that followed, Ellen's family challenged the official finding and called for a thorough investigation of Ellen's death. They believed that she had been murdered in her apartment. In February 2025, the pathologist who worked on the case in 2011 changed his finding, declaring that Ellen's cause of death was something other than her own behavior. This change of opinion is important to the family, but the pathologist no longer works for the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office, so his opinion has no official significance. According to the city of Philadelphia, Ellen's death was not a homicide. Now moving to my analysis. Many people are very upset by the official finding in Ellen's death. They believe that someone entered her apartment and murdered her. They wonder how a person could have been stabbed 20 times without the involvement of another party. Furthermore, there are serious concerns with the quality of the investigation. The city of Philadelphia, of course, disagrees. They argue that this case did not involve homicide. Ellen was in the apartment alone. Therefore, she had to be the one responsible. This brings me to the question, was Ellen the victim of a homicide? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that she was murdered, starting with the factors that support this theory. Criminal activity is not unheard of in the Manayunk neighborhood of Philadelphia. There was no forced entry into Ellen's apartment, but it's possible that she let the killer in. Perhaps the killer stabbed her and left the apartment. Somehow, before she died, Ellen engaged the swing bar lock, fearful that the killer would return. At this point, she collapsed in the kitchen just a few feet away. It's also possible that the killer used a string, a shoelace, a coat hanger, or something like that to pull the lock closed from outside the apartment before leaving the building. Ellen sustained 20 stab wounds, with 10 of those to the back of her neck. If she had been the one holding the knife, that would have been difficult to do. There were 11 bruises on Ellen's body, suggesting that perhaps someone had been harming her in the days leading up to the killing. The door being locked from the inside strongly contradicts the homicide theory, but maybe the swing bar lock was already broken, like it had been damaged before the day of the tragedy. Now moving to the factors contradicting the theory that Ellen was the victim of a homicide. Ellen was killed with a 5-inch steak knife, which came from her own kitchen. The only DNA on that knife belonged to her. If she was murdered, the killer not only failed to bring a weapon, they somehow managed not to leave any of their DNA behind. It's almost like they were some type of ghost or master assassin. There were no signs of a struggle in the apartment, other than Ellen being dead. How would the killer have managed to commit the murder without disturbing the apartment? Nothing was missing. What was the motive for the murder? Why would anyone want to kill Ellen? Under the homicide theory, either Ellen locked the door after she was stabbed, which seems unlikely, or the killer used a string or something similar to engage the lock after stepping outside the apartment. Why would the killer take the time to do this? Most killers would flee the area immediately. They are not looking to settle down or take in the local culture. It is suspicious that Ellen was stabbed 20 times, but many of the wounds were only a few millimeters deep. The cause of death was multiple stab wounds, but one can make a good argument that the stab wound to her chest would have been fatal alone. The knife was found in her chest. almost like the stabbing stopped with the fatal injury. This is consistent with Ellen being responsible. Investigators concluded that the front door of the apartment was locked from the inside. The sixth-floor balcony was covered in undisturbed snow, so no one entered or exited through the balcony. Starting in November 2010, 2 months before she died, Ellen had a sudden onset of intense anxiety. She wanted to know if she could move to her parents' residence in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Ellen was overwhelmed at work and under a lot of pressure due to regulatory changes and problems with students. She was considering leaving her job. In reference to her trouble at work, Ellen made statements like, "I hate every second of work. I can't keep feeling this way, and I just can't stand it." Ellen was treated 3 times by a mental health clinician. Her 4th appointment was scheduled for the day after she died. A prescription was written to Ellen for the generic versions of Xanax, Klonopin, and Ambien. Some people have difficulty adjusting to medications like these. In the weeks leading up to the tragedy, Ellen searched the internet several times for terms like quick death, suffocation, and depression. Ellen had 11 bruises on her body in various stages of healing, but she denied that Sam ever harmed her. There was never even one complaint of violence. If this case did involve homicide, one theory is that Sam could have been the killer. If that is true, why would Sam break the door to discover his victim's body? Many killers arrange for someone else to find the murder victim. The injuries Ellen sustained were consistent with someone who was emotionally driven. It would be very unusual to see an offender commit a murder driven by strong emotions, then take the time to carefully and patiently execute the locking of a swing bar lock from outside the door. This would take a lot of time and patience, but the person's rage would interfere with that type of precise action. When considering all the evidence in this case, do I think that Ellen was the victim of a homicide? No. In my opinion, Ellen was responsible for the fatal injuries. Many people, of course, feel differently. They believe someone murdered Ellen. The primary argument in favor of the homicide theory is the atypical nature of a woman being stabbed 20 times without a homicide. The problem here is, how did the door get locked from the inside? Yes, Ellen's death was atypical if she was responsible. However, is it more atypical than a killer who can walk through walls? All the possibilities in this case are unlikely, but one unlikely event must have occurred. The question is, what is the probability of each event relative to the remaining events? In my opinion, the most probable explanation is that no homicide occurred. Now moving to my last question, what did I think about the documentary, Death in Apartment 603, What Happened to Ellen Greenberg? On the positive side, the documentary offered a thorough retelling of the facts and explored the emotions of the people affected by the tragedy. One could really appreciate the pain and suffering caused by Ellen's death. A lot of people miss her. On the negative side, the documentary was repetitive. One of the worst offenses a documentary can make is to repeat the same information in several different ways, something this documentary did myriad times. Some important disclosures should be restated, but this documentary traveled far beyond that boundary. It felt like they were just trying to extend the length of the documentary artificially without adding any value. I felt like the homicide theory was promoted in the documentary much more than the alternative. It was really about trying to prove that a murder occurred. This wasn't just skepticism, rather it was looking for any possible clue, no matter how insignificant or contested, that could refute the homicide theory. The idea here was to give Ellen a voice and to seek justice for her. I think the documentary worked against those objectives. The best way to honor someone like Ellen is to tell the truth. The lesson learned in this case is how mental health symptoms can have a rapid and powerful onset, which can overwhelm a person. Even a person who has a lot to look forward to. Even a person who seems well-adjusted. Even a person who is gregarious and friendly. And even a person who has many supportive friends and relatives. No one is immune from mental health difficulties. Those are my thoughts on the case of Ellen Greenberg. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.